So Ron, you're on.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you, Annabelle, for stepping in and you and Linda setting up this Zoom meeting. Our biggest fear when we started this project was that we would have a snow day. And go figure, we had the snow day. I find it interesting, the term community activist. I'm kind of grew up in the 60s and early 70s, and community activist then I think had a little different connotation to it than it does today. But it did bring back some memories back into growing up in the 60s. One of the things I wanted to start off with is about 12 or 13 years ago, my wife Jo and I started to look for a serene and peaceful place to locate upon retirement. And we looked and looked and looked, and lo and behold, as soon as we found this place in Hardee County in Baker, as soon as we pulled up to it, we said, that's it. And after a little more research about Hardee County, the Hardee County government, we were sure this is the place we wanted to retire. And lo and behold, 4 years ago or so, we went for a ride in our side-by-side up on top of Short Mountain. And in the Meadow Hills community parallels the top of the mountain for about 1.5 to 2 miles. And as we drove along, enjoying the sights, we came to the very end of the road in Meadow Hills, and there were some survey stakes in the end of the road. At that time, I was president of the organization, and I was of the Homeowners Association, and I was unaware of anything activity going on that would require surveys on Meadow Hills property. I took some numbers off the survey stakes, talked to a friend who kind of helped me understand what the numbers meant. We were able to track it down to a surveying company in Manassas, Virginia. They referred me to their parent company in Columbus, Ohio. And they admitted that they were doing surveys. And I said, well, why are you surveying on private property? And they didn't have an answer for that, but they indicated they were surveying, but they wouldn't tell me who they were surveying for. But they were surveying a large tract of land on top of the mountain. A couple of weeks later, most of the homeowners in the area received letters from a company called Invenergy. Invenergy wrote a letter telling us about the scope of their project and how wonderful it was going to be for the community. Well, obviously, it immediately raised red flags. I don't know, and I wasn't able to, in time, to get this chart up. So those of you who can see it, this is a chart. And it shows the wind turbine in relation to basically what's next to it is the Washington Monument. Many of you have seen this chart. Wind turbines, they propose to put on Short Mountain a total of 19 or 50 feet higher than the Washington Monument. And if you can imagine that, it's hard to imagine. And then you ask yourself, why would they pick Short Mountain? There are many other mountain ridges in West Virginia that are taller and more remote, less inhabited. There's one answer. That's the answer. If you look at the logistics, it becomes easy to understand that Short Mountain was, in their mind, in Invenergy's mind, easy pickings because it was close to a power transfer station in Baker. Therefore, the infrastructure to transfer power generated from the wind turbines could go right to the power station that already exists and then be moved out of the state of West Virginia. So it became very apparent at the time of what was taking place. As Linda indicated, and I won't try to show you, I have a copy of the map, but you can look at it on Google Maps, on the Google site. There are 19 proposed sites on top of the mountain. It runs for several miles from Baker almost to Rio. Interesting enough, and other speakers will address it, all the property surrounding that site, including the site itself, are zoned residential. That in itself tells you something right there, that obviously there was a roadblock for Invenergy to move forward. And you'll hear more about that in the future. If you look at, and again, this is not on the website yet, but I'll make sure it gets there. If you look at the distances between the wind turbines and the commercial properties surrounding the turbine site, the distances range from 244 feet, 1,900 feet. Now keep in mind, these turbines are 607 feet tall, but yet the energy company, Invenergy, wants to place them within 244 feet and 1,900 feet from residential property. 16 of the 19 turbines are less than 760 feet from residential property. Anybody listening to this has to say to themselves, what are they thinking? How could they place a 607-foot turbine, some of them 244 feet from residential property, 16 of them being within 760 feet of residential property? How could this happen? How could our government let it happen? And our local government isn't. I have some concerns, though, at a state level. So looking at, remember those statistics, because that is absolutely critical. I want to talk to you a little bit now that we all enjoy the peace and serenity and the lifestyle that the mountains of West Virginia afford us. I've had the opportunity in my lifetime, in my career, to travel all over the United States, and in several trips have been to Alaska. And there's nothing more majestic than seeing the state of Alaska. However, West Virginia comes very, very close to the majesty that you would feel if you were looking at the mountains of Alaska. I'm sure many of you saw the commercials during Christmas time that the Department of Tourism put on in the state of West Virginia, and it showed rolling mountains and mountains and mountains after mountains. Now, do you think the Department of Tourism would show a film of rolling mountains of wind turbines after wind turbines after wind turbines? And I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but could that eventually happen if we don't put controls? And I'm not saying eliminate or stop entirely. I'm talking about controlling the growth of alternative energy in the state of West Virginia. That is something we're not doing on a state level. However, we are making a real good effort on a county level. I want to address briefly, too, that we all are property owners, and our property has value. Whether it's not just the value that it affords to us of the peace and quiet, the serenity and the wildlife and the nature that abounds on Short Mountain or in all the mountains throughout the state of West Virginia, but it also has dollar value. And many of us are interested in leaving this on to our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. But if at some point in time the property has to be sold, we want to make sure there's value to it. Now, I have a study that was commissioned by a county in Illinois, and it was about the installation of turbines in a county in the state of Illinois and it indicates that losses in residential property can be expected within a 2-mile radius of a wind turbine facility, a 2-mile radius. Now, if you look at the siting that Invenergy has proposed on Short Mountain, 2 miles would have it down on Neatmore Road or down on the other side of Arkansas. It would be impossible to put a turbine facility on top of Short Mountain that didn't impact over 200 commercial residences within a 2-mile radius. I find it unconscionable that anybody in their right mind would say, let's put a turbine factory up there, knowing the impact that it's going to have on this community. I can't imagine any state legislator sitting in Charleston thinking that that would be okay for the residents of West Virginia. It would deprive homeowners of not only the peace, the quiet, and the serenity and the lifestyle that they've worked so hard to enjoy, but it would also deprive them of dollar value and dollar losses on the property. I have not seen a contract yet from a turbine company that guarantees market value for their property. I don't think you'll ever see that because they know what happens. Many of you are familiar with Ashton Woods. When the power lines went through Ashton Woods, there were some properties that went up for sale that were half the price of market value. Frequently, those properties can't be sold and are abolished. This study goes on to say that if Adams County in Illinois were to agree to any setback of 1,500 feet or less within 2 miles, the property values would be significantly impacted by 20 to 40%. 20 to 40%. The approval of any wind project within close proximity to occupied homes is tantamount to an inverse condemnation or regulatory taking of private rights, as the noise and impacts are in some respects a physical invasion, an easement in gross or over neighboring properties, and direct impacts reduce property values and the rights of nearby neighbors. I ran a study just in my community of 70 parcels of land, and at 20% devaluation, it's $2.5 million devaluation in property. At 40%, it's over it's $5 million in devaluation of property value. That's just in my community. As I mentioned, there's over 250 residential properties just surrounding where they want to place these turbines. I could go on for a long time, and I apologize because I know my time is getting short. But logically, an energy company will come back and say, well, we have this study, and we have this study, and we have this study. We all have studies. But think about it this way. Would you buy a property within 1,500 feet or even a mile or two from a 607-foot tall wind turbine? I think not. Would you vote to have one of these placed within 550 feet of your residential property? I think not. That's the logic of it. You don't have to listen to studies. Think about it logically of what the impact will be on property. Let me very hurriedly now talk about safety concerns, and we talk about wildlife. Obviously, they'll strip the mountain for several miles. The impact on nature and the wildlife, the ecosystem, it goes on and on and on. Talk about turbine collapse. This isn't made up. You can go on Google, write in turbine collapse. You will see dozens and dozens of films about turbine collapses throughout the world. Turbine collapse is nothing more than the structure itself collapsing and throwing parts and blades as far as a quarter of a mile. And keep in mind what I said earlier, they want to place these within 244 feet of a residential property, but a blade which weighs tons can fly off and travel a quarter of a mile. That's what's known as blade throw. Think about a 600-foot turbine catching on fire. Baker Volunteer Fire Department, God bless them. They have no facilities whatsoever to put out a fire of that magnitude. There's not a fire department in the state of West Virginia that can reach 607 feet and put out a fire of that magnitude. We all know that we've had a burn ban going on in Hardy County now for quite some time. What is a burn ban then? When one of these catches on fire and those turbines are rotating at 200 miles per hour, throwing flames throughout within hundreds of yards, that mountain will go up like you've never seen before. And all they'll be able to do is contain it on the mountain as hundreds of residential properties burn. Fire is an extreme. There have been fires on Storm Mountain. There's several fires already have been documented on Storm Mountain. Okay. Other issues. When we talked about the distances that commercial residential properties will be, and I mentioned 244 feet. Their own Vesta, the turbine manufacturer, their own guidelines state that their personnel are to keep 1,300 feet from an operating turbine unless it's absolutely necessary for them to get closer. This is from their own safety manual, but yet they want to be within 244 feet of residential properties. Another manual goes on to say that a turbine that is malfunctioning, they will not allow their own personnel to get within 1,640 feet of a malfunctioning turbine, but yet we have homes so much closer than that. What do we do with the residential properties and the people within those homes when their own safety manuals indicate their own personnel are not allowed for their safety to get any closer to those turbines than 1,640 feet? Don't you find that a little ironic? One other thing, and I know I'm just about out of time, but this is kind of new news. Report just came out of Germany. Many of you probably remember the fumigation project that was slated to go into Hardy County. And the residents of Hardy County gathered together and were up in arms, and they beat it down, and it was not to take place. There's nothing different here, but we're talking about energy and clean energy, and we're not opposed to that. We're opposed to the proper siting. A report out of Germany. There's a chemical that is used building wind turbines, and it's called sulfur hexafluoride, SF6. It's used for the manufacturing of wind turbines and escapes into the environment. Germany right now is the leader of wind turbine placements in Europe, and they have the most exposure to SF6, excuse me. Scientists claim that SF6 is a climate killer. In fact, it is 26,000, not 100, 26,000 times more harmful to the climate than carbon dioxide. Once this substance enters the atmosphere, it takes 3,000 years for SF6 to decompose. 3,000 years to decompose. This is a new report, just came out. Okay.
Thank you, Ron.
One last thing, if I may, and I'm sorry. We talked about the funding for these projects. 60 to 70% are your tax dollars. So your federal tax dollars are paying to have these built. Many of these wind companies, particularly Invenergy, once they build these projects, within a year or two, they sell them off at big profits and they're gone. And then they come to the problem of the life cycle of the wind turbines themselves and what happens to them when they die. And they die within about 15 years. We have no plans to dispose of them. They end up in landfills and pollute Mother Earth as we know it today. There are so many holes in this, and we know now a big wind turbine project was just canceled off of New Jersey, found it not to be economical. A lawsuit with Osage County, Oklahoma, federal government sued, Osage County Indians sued and won. 128 turbines have to be removed, $300 million cost to the turbine company. Things are starting to unravel. But what we have to do, though, is get in front of this before we are fighting an uphill battle. We need our legislatures in Charleston to understand this before they make decisions and before it's too late. I apologize for going over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Great. Our next speaker is Stephen Schetrom. He has served on the County Commission in Hardee County since January 2021. During that time, he has served as the Commission's representative on the Hardee County Planning Commission. As part of that group, he has been actively engaged in a range of issues impacting the county. Many of these issues relate to energy, agriculture, and the environment. Stephen is very active in both the County Commissioners Association of West Virginia and the West Virginia Association of Counties, working within these groups on legislative issues impacting counties throughout the state. Additionally, he serves on the Environment, Energy, and Land Use Committee for the National Association of Counties, and he is vice chair of the Energy Subcommittee. Stephen resides in Baker with his wife, Rachel, who's a teacher at East Hardee High School, and they have two sons. One son is a sophomore at East Hardee High School, and the other is a first-year cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point. This afternoon, Stephen will talk about what steps the developer will need to take in order to get approval from the county. And I present to you, Steve Schetrom.
Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate it. It is great to be here. I appreciate everyone's work, all the work that went into putting this together. And I also appreciate the community we live in. Hardee County is a great community. Truly enjoy. I enjoy being commissioner in this county. It is hard work if you're going to be active. I will say that, but I very much enjoy being commissioner in this county. I think that the work that is going into this issue has been significant. There have been countless hours spent both by volunteers as well as county officials related to this project. And I will say to those who are involved, because we've been working on these issues for a couple of years now, and it takes a lot of work and it's sometimes exhausting. But I will say that the work that we have done has been impactful, and that we should continue in this fight, because I think it is very important. And I think that many people, and this becomes evident because you receive calls from people throughout the state, that many people throughout our state have also become engaged in this. So it is a very, very important issue that has implications for the future of our state, and that we should stay involved and fighting as hard as we can in it. But first, what I want to give you is just a little bit of a joke. People see planning. It's very interesting the way we see that people see planning. Sometimes it's when it's not impacting them, people are not really, they're kind of standoffish about planning. But then when it does impact them, they're very, very concerned. So there was a judge, a bishop, and a planner. And so they're having a discussion, they're talking amongst themselves. And just like most people, there's a certain amount of vanity there, and their talk soon goes to the idea of who among them is the greatest. So the judge says, well, my position is one of dignity and power. When I walk into the courtroom, the bailiff says, all rise, and all the people stand to pay me honor. Well, that's very nice, said the bishop, but people stand in your honor, but when people have an audience with me, they kneel, kiss my ring, and they address me as your eminence. The planner snorted and said, I think I got you both beat. Walk into any room as a consultant, the people look down, put their hands over their eyes, and say, oh my God. And that's kind of how it is sometimes with planning, but don't do that, because planning is very important. And first I want to talk about the context that this utility scale energy project has come into our county. So county planning, our state code allows for county planning. So if a county is doing county planning and zoning, they're doing that under state law. The county commission and the county commission in any county is a political subdivision of the state, but under our West Virginia code, and this is chapter 8A of the West Virginia code, counties have the right to establish planning and to enact zoning ordinances. For example, chapter 8A-1-1, legislative findings, that planning, land development, and land use is vitally important to a community. You read further down through the code, 8A-1-1A2, a planning commission is helpful to a community to plan for land development, land use, and the future. You go further down through the code, 8A-1-1A9, governing bodies of municipalities and counties need flexibility when authorizing land development and use. So what I'm saying with this, there's a context in which Invenergy has come to approach the county and talk about their intentions. The context of that is that our state has given counties the right to establish ordinances, and they furthermore said that counties need flexibility in establishing those ordinances in order to plan for their future. So when we go a little bit further down the code, 8A-1-1B8D, based upon a comprehensive plan, which must first be established, and that's what Hardy County did in the 1970s. So county planning and zoning has been in place in Hardy County since the 1970s. Governing bodies may enact a zoning ordinance. And you can find at the Google Docs link that has been sent our county zoning map. I encourage you to do that, as well as where you can find the location for Short Mountain within that county zoning map. So just to think about that, planning, zoning in place since the 1970s, as people have bought property in the county, including in the Short Mountain area, it has been under zoning laws that have been in force for about 50 years. I think that is very, very important, because those laws represent a promise. When someone is buying that property, they're buying that with the assumption that this is the law. If the zoning is in place, they're buying it with that knowledge that there is zoning established there. There's always a context in which something is going to happen or not happen within a county, and that's the context within Hardy County. And as Ron spoke so eloquently about, Invenergy took action in this context, and he has talked about the height of the windmills. He's talked about how close they are to residential zoned, both residences themselves and the property lines. And despite all this, Invenergy visited the Hardy County Planning Office, notifying the county of the company's intentions on August the 4th, 2021. Now, I want to and this is the meat of what I'm talking about today, the county's response. In other words, the path forward that was given to Invenergy by the county. So number one, there are 6 points under this section. Currently, and this is still true, Currently, the Hardee County zoning ordinance does not contain any provisions that clearly allow or prohibit a utility scale wind energy project. Typically, when a zoning ordinance does not explicitly allow a use, it is considered to be prohibited. So that's point number one. The zoning ordinance does not explicitly allow this type of project, nor does it explicitly prohibit it. So the current conditions then following that, the site proposed by Invenergy for a utility scale wind project is currently zoned residential. And in the opinion of the Hardee County Planning Commission, there is no path forward for zoning approval for such a project in an area zoned residential due to the potential conflict of the two uses. So you have residential near what would probably be considered by most people industrial. That will always cause conflict. And that's why the Hardee County Planning Commission does not at present see a path forward for Invenergy. And it's because of already established zoning laws that have been in place for 50 years in our county. So even with that, it wasn't explicitly prohibited to Invenergy. The Hardee County Planning Commission still gave them a path forward. A special meeting was called on October the 28th of 2021. After that meeting, here is the path forward that was given to Invenergy. After much analysis and discussion, and this was given to them in writing, between the Planning Commission and staff concerning the language, purpose, and intent of the various zoning districts, the Planning Commission came to the conclusion that if the applicant, that's Invenergy, intends to immediately submit an application, the proposed project would be most suitable in an industrial district. The primary reason for this decision is that the industrial district currently allows, and this is quote, and this is in our ordinance, any extractive type industry that extracts and or processes non-renewable resources. So the correct zone looked to be industrial, but it's zone residential, but it looked to be, and the decision of the Planning Commission is that it would need to be industrial for the project to move forward. So number 4, and this is the path forward that Invenergy would need to take. Invenergy would petition the Hardee County Commission for a text amendment that would create a path for application in the industrial district. The recommended path is that utility scale energy projects be added to the list of conditional uses in the industrial district. So first off, we have to have a path forward even in an industrial district because it's not in our current zoning. So the Invenergy would need to go to the Hardee County Commission and ask that a text amendment be made to the current ordinance that is in place that would allow for utility scale energy projects in industrial districts. Following that, and point number 5, if the text amendment, which would include public hearings, when that came before the county commission, there would need to be public hearings. But if that text amendment is adopted as part of the ordinance, the applicant then the applicant is Invenergy in this case, must then ask the Planning Commission to grant a rezoning to the industrial district, because remember, it's explicitly residential right now, all of this property. So first of all, they would have to even have it as a conditional use, and that's where they go to the county commission. It would need to be a conditional use in the industrial district. Then secondly, they would need to then come to the planning commission and ask that this specific property be rezoned from residential to industrial. So that's the second step as part of the process. If the rezoning then was granted, the applicant would then need to follow the application process outlined by that district or amendment. This process would include specific conditions to be set by the Board of Zoning Appeals during a Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing. So those were the steps. I do think they were logical. They were very clear. They were given to them in writing after a special meeting. Everything was done very much in the open, and it was done under current law. Everything that was given to Invenergy was done in that way. Despite this, following our giving of this path forward to Invenergy, we heard nothing more from them. What we understood to be the case was that following that, they began working at the West Virginia legislature in order to have state code amended so that these type of projects could bypass local zoning laws. For example, in the 2022 legislative session, and Linda, if I go over, just if you will give me a warning and I'll stop. I'm almost to the end of it, but if I do, just let me know. In the 2022 regular legislative session, HB 4553, that said that if under Section F of that bill, exempt wholesale generators are permitted use in any zoning district, the county's interpretation and the correct interpretation is that this bill would have allowed companies like Invenergy to completely bypass local zoning. And that was a huge deal. It's a game changer. If a bill like that is passed in our legislature, it's a game changer because you've then overridden years of state law that has allowed Hardee County to have planning and zoning laws, years of state law that has influenced people's purchasing decisions as they have bought property in Hardee County. All of this matters and it's important. And if a bill like HB 4553, and there have been others following it in the last legislative session, if that would pass, it is a complete game changer. So just some general things to consider. There must be some guidelines in place for projects of this magnitude. For example, many states around the country have established at least setback requirements for the installation of wind turbines. West Virginia has not done this. What about the importance of communities? At least part of the reason, evidently, for the establishment of Chapter 8A of the West Virginia Code was to allow communities to plan their own futures. This most certainly helps to foster a strong social fabric in local communities. Is this still important or not? West Virginia, thirdly, West Virginia's vitality is enhanced, not diminished by its diverse regions. Strong local governments planning their futures adds to this vitality. And number 4, and finally, does not the impulsive changing of laws as a result of the current economic and political environment provide an opening for lawsuits? Because damage, as has been indicated by Ron as well as me, damages have taken place if this is allowed, and there has to be recourse for this. That's what I want to leave you with. I do appreciate your time. I appreciate the engagement from our community. Thank you very much. And when you hear the action items that are given at the end of our meeting today, please be involved. It does take a community. It's not about one person or even a small group of people. It takes community engagement from us all. And I do appreciate your engagement. I think it makes a huge difference, but thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you, Steve. That was really enlightening because it's kind of confusing as to what the pathway for Invenergy is, but you really helped clarify that for us. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Delegate Bryan Ward, who has served Hardee County District 55 for the last 2 legislative sessions, and he's preparing for his 3rd year as our representative. You may know Bryan as a former sheriff of Hardee County. Delegate Ward serves on several committees, including Agriculture and Natural Resources, Committee on Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services, Jails and Prisons, and Judiciary. He lives in Moorfield with his bride, Cheryl, and they have 1 daughter who is attending college. You will find Bryan enjoying a warm cup of coffee and talking to community members. This afternoon, Bryan will talk to you about the 2022 and 2023 legislative sessions when renewables attempted to exempt them from the local ordinances. He will talk to you about the 2024 legislative session and the challenges we face. Thank you. I present to you Delegate Ward. You need, there you go.
I had done meeting myself. My apologies. Thank you, Ms. Linda, for the fine introduction. Just one correction. My first term in office, I served District 55, which was all of Hardy in its entirety, and the portion east of Franklin in Pendleton County. And then, as we do at every 10th year at the census, we do redistricting. And it just so happens that I serve essentially the same territory, my district, but it is now District 86. So that's the only correction I've got. I didn't have a prepared statement. I spent the day driving in the freezing rain and snow, and I just got here, and I probably look a little disheveled. But in any event, Ron and Linda, I've known Stephen for some time, but Ron and Linda and I got very well acquainted back early in the in my time in the legislature with regards to the bills that were coming to essentially mitigate the rules and the of the counties that have zoning and planning. I've worked previously on any number of topics with our county planner, Melissa Scott, and I suspect that she'll provide a good bit of data. I couldn't summarize Ron's view on the myriad of problems that these windmills present, not just from an economical standpoint, from a view shed, from tourism. There's so many different ways to look at this. My background is public safety. I'm twice retired. I retired as a firefighter paramedic for the city of Cumberland, which I worked simultaneously working my first 20 years in law enforcement. And then, of course, the last were that of the elected sheriff in Hardy County. The safety aspects of these wind turbines are what's most concerning. Ron touched on the challenges, or frankly, the realities that fire service personnel can't do anything about this. It's if a turbine fails and the top of the mountain catches fire, that fire will encroach on occupied properties. Even if we sent every volunteer fire company, excuse me, from 5 different counties, there would be no way to safely do this. The other issues that Stephen talked about, where he summarized what the 22 and 23 legislative sessions offered with challenges to the handful of counties that have zoning and planning. Of course, this attempt to amend current state code was tailor suited. It was specifically for Short Mountain, but it opens up the door for the other 7 or 8 counties that have some combination of zoning and planning. And with what Stephen said about the promise that was made to all of those in the community since the 70s, when our zoning was enacted, these people built families and built their homes, and with the promise that this would always be a residential area. So I'm not speaking for or against alternative forms of energy. I've got my own solar system at home that I tinker with, and I didn't get any tax credits on it, but it's there's value in exploring alternative forms of energy, but not at the expense of an entire community. We have other problems that are going on right now in Wardensville, and I know the mayor had reached out to me, with the completion or extension of the corridor. It is essentially going to potentially ruin access to Wardensville, and there's sometimes state government or big entities will invest in something, and the little people just stop mattering. But with regards to the wind turbines, the public safety aspect is what's of most concern. And this is the bills that came forward in 2022 and 2023. I spent a lot of time talking to those that were on the Energy Committee, and that's where these bills started. And they were essentially to exempt wholesale power generators from any zoning ordinances. As we got into it this coming year, we've been on defense, and we've had great success, and most of that is due to the homework that Ron and Linda and Stephen Schetrom have it's just constant communications. And Melissa Scott, it was almost daily. Okay, here, we have this bill. What's the best way to defeat it? So, it was a lot of pleadings with individuals at the legislative level to try to get them to understand. And some of the responses that I got, it appeared that they were receiving it as a NIMBY, not in my backyard argument. So we're going to fight this same fight again in 2024. I've not seen the language that's in any bill that's going to once again attempt to exempt wholesale generators from zoning ordinances. But for the other 45 counties, they're not going to have any protection. So back to what Ron had talked about with the safety of these are for health reasons. These are for outright safety with wind throw, with the problems with brush fires, especially on top of a mountain and in such close proximity. I'm tired of playing defense, and I've got in bill drafting, and I've shared that language with Ron, Linda, and Stephen, and anybody else is welcome. I'm not sure if you have that accessible on there or not, Linda, for anybody to see, but I've simply tried to provide a statewide 2-mile setback, and that way for the counties that don't have zoning and planning, there still must be a consideration for every community within the state that they're going to have some assurance that there's not going to be a threat that public safety can't deal with. And then, of course, the economic damages, those are, certainly irrespective of whether a county has zoning or planning. Any wind turbine site that's going to be in close proximity to residential properties is going to have negative impacts on their health, on the value of their property. But the public safety angle is what's most concerning to me. And for that reason, we kind of going on the offense to provide some reasonable guidance that the entire state can follow, so that this battle doesn't have to be defended year after year. And like I say, the two prior speakers summed things up in a way that I'm not nearly as eloquent, but I'm happy to yield back my time, Linda, to the two prior speakers or anybody else, and I'll remain here to answer any questions if I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryan. That leads to my call for action. Now, here's where you can be involved. Please plan on attending our January 13th, 2024 brunch meetup. Let's get ready to engage the West Virginia legislature. And that will be conducted at the Lost River Yoga Barn from noon to 2 p.m. Secondly, we are organizing a trip to Charleston, and we'd like you to come. So to meet with the legislators, and we would appreciate you coming with us on that trip. And now it is time for our question and answer session, and Annabelle's gonna be managing that for me, because I think through chat their questions have come up.
Yeah, hi. Let's see. I think the one question, Ron, I don't know if you saw in the chat, is about your sources. Someone asked if you could share your sources for your information that you presented. Can you respond to that?
Is anything specific though that you're interested? I mean, I can, if you're
I think
referencing
there was a
the land
question about the
value,
height.
the height actually came from
Um,
Invenergy, and I can go back and
okay.
I can answer that question on the height of the turbine. There were two sources for that. One is the FAA aeronautical study, and they have to get permits from the FAA. And as part of that study and permit, the 19 turbines are listed, the elevation for each one, the longitude and the latitude, and the total height, tip height of each turbine. And that was 608 feet. Secondly, there was a second source. Invenergy has 3 consultants that have done studies. One of the studies was a market analysis study. And at the beginning of that document was a discussion about the project area, and that the turbines were described then. But the FAA is the best source for that.
you're right, Linda. This is the chart provided by FAA, and on this chart it lists every turbine, and it lists the height of 608 feet. So this is not data that we created; it's data that FAA and Invenergy put on the chart.
Okay. Okay, let's see. You guys can go ahead and, raise your hand using the Zoom function under reactions. Or you can show me a physical hand also, and then continue to ask questions in the chat. Okay, so I'm gonna pass this on to John Rosado. If you could, John, ask your question, because I think it'd be more efficient than me reading your question.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. I appreciate it. My question's for Delegate Ward. Delegate Ward, last year in the legislative session, there was Senate Bill 585, which would have exempted all agricultural uses from land use planning as well, which, would hobble the county's ability to potentially regulate concentrated feed operations like the one that went in old fields. And similar to the way you've drafted some language to preempt the efforts for Short Mountain, I'm wondering if you've drafted any language to kind of preempt those kinds of bills like 585 again this legislative session.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Thanks for the question, John. I don't. I know that there was language in the last year's farm bill, and it was had a lot of different facets to it. There was some opposition. I recall some of the debates about concentrated chicken houses or farms, and I've tried to do some real research on the poultry industry as it relates to Hardy County and the wealth of Hardy County. There were so local control it's a thorny topic legislatively, and I'll do my best to give you an honest answer. So the legislature looks at agriculture and looks at industrial wind turbines, of course, from a public safety issue. And again, that's where most of my energy or excitement for the bill that I had drafted dealt specifically for the safety issues that these wind turbines present. The discussions about the farming and the problems that that Hardee County and the surrounding counties have had to deal with to keep Pilgrim's Pride at a level where they can still employ the 1,500 plus folks that they need so many houses. And with the generational changes, that specific topic has created problems for getting birds into the Pilgrim's Pride, simply because the newer generation is not as interested in taking over the family farm. It's a lot of work. When I was courting my wife, she was still in high school, and she was not allowed to date, but they had poultry houses. So my whole courtship was gathering eggs in 2 laying hen houses. That property ended up being, turned into the Parker Holler Dam, so it doesn't exist anymore. But there's so many farms, the double-decker farms, and if you go out in the communities and you see the farm, the 2-house chicken farms, Pilgrim's Pride is still encouraging folks, and they won't decline any contracts for 2-house farm operations. The problem is those are dying off, and everything that we enjoy in Hardee County. I'll often talk to some of the delegates. You can just tell the wealth of a county by the number of banks that it has. And you drive through Wardensville, there's various different banks, and I'm maybe going down a rabbit hole, but the local control arguments are different for these wind turbines, which is the entire focus of my bill, and I can have that discussion about the mega house or large scale poultry farms that you're mentioning, but they're 2 entirely different arguments, and I didn't measure my words with that statement, but that's as frank as I can possibly be.
No, and I appreciate your frankness. I would just say that the approach you're taking on Short Mountain is appreciated, and I think setbacks could be an interesting tactic on the large scale poultry farms as well, because the same arguments about property values and public safety in terms of the environmental impact and smells that those facilities do produce, I think are very similar between the wind turbines and the poultry houses as well. And nobody wants to threaten the economic vitality of Hardee County. It's all about where to locate those kinds of facilities, not if they should be located in the county. So I would just leave that with you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 3 hands right now. Nate, let's go in the order of Nate, Kane, and then Jean and Pat, and then Robert. So Nate.
Hey, everyone. Thank you to the person that invited me to this. I am a candidate running for the U.S. House of Representatives for the 2nd District, and I'm very interested in hearing about the different issues that are going on in that district, and of course, Hardee County being one of those. This has been a very informative meeting, and I want to just thank you guys for sharing this information. I have a couple of concerns, and I'm wondering if anybody has any knowledge about this. One of them is that just looking into this a little bit, it looks like these windmills are 80 megawatts, or the project is 80 megawatts. And in just a little bit of research that I've done, it looks that the average cost for decommissioning per megawatt is $51,000, which would put this smack dab at about $4 million in order to decommission these when they end their life cycle. If these are built up on taxpayers' dollars and they're sold to some other company, who's going to end up footing the bill to basically decommission this? Is it going to also be tax-funded dollars? So that is a concern of mine. I'm also curious about if West Virginia's Economic Development Authority is involved in this project at all. For some of you may be aware of the Form Energy project that went into Weirton, West Virginia, and I'm very concerned about that project. See, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that people may not be aware of, but in the case of that project, you had the Podesta Group, which was a lobbying firm that had lobbied Congress to get 3 exemptions. And I don't think our delegates were even aware, or our senators were even aware, that this was going on behind the scenes. But they were given 3 exemptions by the U.S. House of Representatives that gave Form Energy an exemption to not have to meet the EPA's water pollution standards, to not have to meet, they're also given an exemption basically giving them no liability in the event of a toxic spill, and they were given an exemption allowing them to source materials from China. Why that's important to this project is because I'm concerned that just because they may say, oh, we're going to do everything environmentally friendly, or we're going to create jobs, or we're not going to source materials from China, doesn't mean that that's exactly what's going to happen. Because, like I said, in this case, they had, hired a lobby firm, which incidentally, John Podesta, who is on Biden's, his green energy, czar advisor, was the one that brought that project to West Virginia. So there's a conflict of interest right there. And I am concerned about that sort of thing happening here. It seems to me, and I'm not opposed to economic development. I'm certainly not opposed to alternative forms of energy, but it makes no sense to put this project right smack dab, next to a residential area. And so, I 100% oppose this project. I will just tell you right off the bat. So I would be very interested in
do you have
talking about this.
Is there a question in there that you want to answer?
Yes. Yeah. The one question that I had in here that I do want to know if anybody knows is the West Virginia Economic Development Authority involved in proposing funding for this?
Nate, I can speak to that and really appreciate you coming and being part of the meeting today. So we did receive a call from the West Virginia EDA related to this project. This has been several months ago now. And that call was to encourage us to not hold it up. And so we returned the call and explained to the representative our position, and they did listen. And so that's the involvement that we've experienced from the WVEDA. And I do think the issue that you're raising about decommissioning is also very important, because so what counties are left with in West Virginia is that you're not an expert, on wind energy. You're not. That's not your area of expertise. The company who's talking to you is. And I've looked at several different pilot agreements from utility scale energy projects around the state. And there are ones there's a very wide range of deals that counties have received from these companies. And if in the agreement, if there was nothing done, like a requirement for the company to post a bond for decommissioning, which that would have to be done. But I don't know that every agreement that has throughout this state has that type of requirement in it. So it's absolutely a very important because it's a significant amount of money. Some projects are much bigger than the one we're talking about on Short Mountain, and it would be even more money there. So definitely the issue of decommissioning is very important.
Okay, let's see. Jean and Pat, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Actually, I have 2 questions. The first one is for Bryan. Hey, Bryan, how are you? Would the 2-mile setback that you are proposing, would that impact solar farms as well as the wind farms, or just wind farms?
Sorry, I'm clumsy with this. No, Jean, this is for wind power projects only.
Okay, great.
And I know that there are and not to cut you off, but I know that there are a lot of parallels that folks are concerned with discussions on land use, and I haven't. I can follow up with details on that, but go ahead. You have a second question for?
Well, the second question is for Steve. Hi, Steve. Didn't Invenergy already request rezoning from residential to agriculture for this property? And would the same county path to the project be the same for agriculture as it would be for industrial?
So the first question, they requested it orally in the meeting, in that meeting, but they did not formally request that.
I see. Okay.
When we had the discussion with them at the meeting, and we gave them our opinion that it should be industrial, and it was obvious they didn't agree with that because they do want it to be agricultural, but they never followed up on it. It was just the discussion that took place in the meeting on that. But the path forward for them, I mean, there would be similarities. It would be much different, like the conditions that were put under agricultural, which I wouldn't anticipate that a project like this, that wouldn't become a discussion, I don't think, in Hardee County. I just don't see that happening because the Planning Commission was pretty uniform in resistance to that. So, okay.
I was going to say the Invenergy's or the state's proposal to in the Farm Bill to exempt agricultural land from local zoning would fit right into their plan. So I guess that's why they made that statement.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That's a great point that, you worry when you have two bills like that and, the company is saying that it wants to be permitted as an agricultural, yet when the Farm Bureau, and this is nothing against anyone in any of these groups, it's just like the facts as you're analyzing this situation as a county representative. So the company is telling you they want to be agriculture. The Farm Bureau pushed that 585 that was referenced by John Rosado. And, that was a very concerning bill to us. And if you put those two together, yes, it would have included wind energy under that 585. So it was extremely concerning.
It's a backdoor. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. And thanks, Ron and Annabelle and everybody for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Robert, your turn. You want to unmute?
All right, can you hear me? All right, so my first question is for Mr. Ward. From what I've seen on the maps here recently is a lot of the properties that Invenergy wants to go across or obtain have all of a sudden become commercial properties. Is there any county commission, any commissions whatsoever of Hardee County that now has the right to change the status of any property from residential to commercial on their own without the landowner's permission?
I think you said that question was directed to me, but
yes,
but I believe Stephen would be the best source to respond to that. I'm not aware of what hearings are required through the Planning Commission, but I know that anything that the Planning Commission seeks to change needs to be ratified by the County Commission. So I think the Planning Commission would get the balls rolling with any public hearings, and I'll yield to Stephen to give a better answer. I don't have the great answer for that.
Okay. Stephen?
To answer your question directly, no, there wouldn't be a case where zoning would just be changed. Just to, give a little more specific answer on that, the applicant, so whoever was requesting this, would ask the Planning Commission to grant a rezoning to whatever district, that they're applying for. That process would go through the legal public hearing process as outlined in the ordinance. So all of these things come under the ordinance, not just someone saying or petitioning that they want this changed. There would need to be public hearings, and it would be a formal process before, for example, a property would be changed from residential to commercial at the county level.
All right, so no county anything has the authority to change anybody's property from residential farming to a commercial property.
They have the authority under the path that's outlined under the ordinance, which that's what I was mentioning there. This path, which would require the public hearings, first the request, then the public hearings, and the whole process. The county wouldn't be able to just do it so the county commission, 3 people agree and say, well, this needs to be changed. That can't happen. It can happen under a path outlined under the ordinance.
Okay, so if this company comes in and says, okay, well, we want to put our windmills here, and they draw a great big circle around it as the crow flies and says, we want all these properties switched to commercial, you guys would agree to it if you think it's a good thing, and then everybody's property would be changed to a commercial property?
No, this is not what is being said. So I think also, if you will go to that Google Docs, there's a document there that step by step lays out what we told Invenergy they would need to do. Like, it's step by step, meaning they had to go to the county and petition the county. Then after the county, they needed to go to the planning commission. There's nothing like if a person, a company wants a change of zoning, they come to the county commission and ask, and we just vote at a county commission meeting and then it's changed. There's nothing like that. Nothing. It's not even close to that. They would be asking for, like, for example, there was there have been several cases that have occurred in Hardy County, since I became commissioner, where someone did want a change of zoning. They have to first submit an application for that change, and then there would have to be public hearings. So there's not a process where a person can ask and then directly the county commission or the planning commission can make that change. There's not that at all. There is a case, though, where a person, through the steps that are outlined in the ordinance, can put in an application for that to happen, and it could change if the entire process is followed through with, and people and it's the decisions are heard at a public hearing, or the arguments are heard at a public hearing, and then it's voted on, but not just a decision is made by the county commission or the planning commission. That's not the process. But yeah.
Okay, I got just 2 more questions real quick. You had said earlier that, Invenergy had come to you and you guys gave them their outline and all that, and they quit responding to you, went straight to the Capitol to try and get it over at the state level, which would pretty much put you guys out of commission, correct? It would all come from the state. You couldn't do a thing about it. Yes. So basically, since they went to the top, it doesn't matter what we say. As long as somebody says okay at the top, then it's going to happen. Is that where I'm at? Because it's going to override anything that the county commission has?
If the law is voted on, that's our interpretation of it. I do think there would be many things that would follow that. There would probably be lawsuits. There would be many things that would follow that. Just because something, if there's a great change, which that law would be a great change, I'm sure other things would follow that. But yes, our interpretation of the law, and it's the correct interpretation, is that law, like the HB 4553 that I referenced, that specific law, that utility scale energy projects are permitted use in any zoning district, that is saying that then the county's enactment of zoning ordinances and zoning districts doesn't matter, that companies can then put their projects where they desire outside of local control. Yes, that is true.
Okay, one last question. If it was said earlier that the big tech or big companies like them, they can get passes on not being able to do pass the water test. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that because they got a free pass from our government that our taxes are paying for this, and then our electric bills goes up. What doesn't that mean that when we just talked about, okay, well, when they go to take them down after 15 years, us, the taxpayers, are going to foot the bill. Our energy bills are going to go up again because that's how they're going to pay for it. Then that means they can bypass pretty much anything they want to if they keep getting these passes from our state government. Is that correct?
I think that's a difficult question to answer. But our electric bills are going up anyway. Potomac Edison and First Energy and Mon Power right now are before the PSC to increase our power bills. In the state of West Virginia, we pretty much embrace coal, and we are not diversified, so we don't have many other sources. I think if we were to look at a pie chart, I think over 85% would be coal, and so that's and as these coal plants are aging, and it's costing more and more for the developer, the owner to keep them running, is costing them more, and they're passing that cost on to the consumer. So other than that, I don't really know how else to respond to your question.
Are all three of those companies owned by one parent company? They're just under different names?
Right.
Okay. So all owned by the same big power company?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the questions I have, and thank you. I appreciate it.
If I could just add this to that about
And
70.
then Ron, and then we have to go to Bryan because he's been raising his hand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just
Okay,
going to finish
okay.
that question.
Yeah, thank you, Annabelle. I'll be brief. Back to Robert there to answer the first part of his question, and he makes a valid point with his question to Steve, but it's a potential opening for counties without zoning or planning. If there's anything, if there's any weakness in the way a bill is written, just like trying to get converted from industrial title to an agriculture title to achieve a means or an objective. It's the bill that I've started is a starting point, and no bill is ever written that's not amended sometimes by its author. So I'll have a chance on Monday during our interims. They're actually starting tomorrow, but Monday to speak with council to see if I can. The way the bill is crafted right now, the intention is to create a 2-mile setback to homes, and if there's some difference from a legal standpoint of residential property, if the power companies or Invenergy were to try to find some angle by having a county commission change the a property from residential to industrial or to agriculture, it may create I may have a weakness there. So I'm going to try to look into that and get some advice from council to make the strongest bill that I can. And again, the objective is simply to keep these wind turbines at least 2 miles from a public safety standpoint, from where people are living. So anyway, that's sorry to interrupt.
Okay,
that's right. Thank you. I appreciate that, Bryan. One more question since you
wait a second. No, Robert, because there are other people waiting to ask questions. So can you hold off? So Ron, I think you wanted a chance
No,
to
that's all right. Go ahead. It's been covered. Thank you.
Okay, So then I have Stephen, and then I have a question in the chat from Terry that I'm hoping that Terry will ask out loud. But let's go to Stephen, Terry, and then hopefully we have time to go back to Robert. Okay, Stephen.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, Annabelle, thank you for the invitation, and Linda, thank you for organizing this. I really appreciate this. I have a quick question, and I think it's really for Stephen, because you are our subject matter expert on zoning and planning in Hardee County. Is there, in your opinion, and I'm not going to hold you to this, but in your opinion, is there any land within the bounds of Hardee County where this would be appropriate, and we could turn this into a win-win for Hardee County and an energy company?
Yeah, I do think, Stephen, that's a great point. It's something that's very good to, bring up in something like this. And in fact, it's something we did look at. I know that when that question was asked initially, to the windmill company, they had done studies, and because of the wind flow and because of the location at Short Mountain, it's their primary objective property in Hardee County. I do know that there are a few other locations, and only one comes to mind that would be even possible for something like this. And but I don't think there could be a trade-off, and I wouldn't. But there was another property, and we did put that out there and ask that question. I don't think there was no desire to do it, is what I will say. There was no incentive, or there was no follow-up on it. So you would think that maybe something like that could happen, and it would be a win-win perhaps, but there was no, it wasn't.
Okay. Hey, just had to ask that question because that's their loss then. If the county and the residents, more importantly, because that's who the county is, it's the residents, if they are willing to seek some alternative and willing to work in partnership with them, hey, awesome. But you know what? If they're going to dig their feet in, well, guess what? They're not going to win. And thank you for what you're doing. And thank you, Bryan, for what you're doing at the state level, and we just need to, be super vigilant about this stuff. And so thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. So Terry, can you ask your question out loud?
Is it working?
Yes.
I'm muted. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I live in Hampshire County, but I'm about 2 miles from the gap that North River makes through Short Mountain. So to me, it's in my neighborhood. So I'm interested in what goes on down there. And my question was, because this proposed legislation at the state level will impact every county in the state, and it will take away the ability of county commissions and planners to control how their land in their counties are developed. Has the commission in Hardee County reached out to the Hampshire County Commission to try to work together with the legislature to keep those efforts, from happening?
Yes, we work very closely. I know all the Hampshire County commissioners very well. We are all involved in the County Commissioners Association of West Virginia, as well as the West Virginia Association of Counties. We've had again and again our bill, or this bill that we're worried about, put before those organizations. So those organizations provide a means for us to work together with other counties. And so that's how we've done it. And so we have legislative calls every Friday, especially during the legislative session. And like, just for example, just not this past Friday, I believe, but the Friday before, That was a legislative call by the County Commissioners Association, and only 3 bills were discussed in that legislative call, and one of those was this bill. So it is being taken up by other county commissions through the state. And yes, so short answer to your question, we work very well with other county commissions through the state, including Hampshire County. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's now
All right,
6 o'clock.
thank you.
Okay, so it's now 6 o'clock. While we are kind of closing the meeting, Robert, do you mind just putting your question into the chat so we can benefit from it? But I'm gonna hand it back to Linda to close this out.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you all very much for coming. There seems to be a high interest in this, and maybe it was a good thing we ended up doing virtual after all. We were concerned that we missed some people, especially on the Arkansas Rio side, that just don't have the home technology or maybe the knowledge of Zoom to do this kind of stuff. But it was great that you all were here and participated. I urge you to attend that meeting on January 13th. And I urge you to really think about attending the state legislature session and be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Linda,
Yes.
in this discussion, I haven't heard anything about maybe raising a few funds. I know Ron and some folks have spent a lot of time and resources. Is there some mechanism where someone like me can contribute to a fund that we can use to help these folks cover some of their costs?
You know what? Actually, I can answer that. I'm trying to work on this because I think we're gonna need some funds to go to Charleston as a group. And so I'm learning about like if we're required to actually file as a nonprofit or if we can actually go ahead and just get a bank account. So I'm kind of working on the legal aspects of it, but I believe that we can quickly set up a fund so that people can contribute to, say, chartering a bus or other expenses that are incurred in this process. So I will keep you posted.
Tom, I could also speak to that just a bit. So the West Virginia Code gives the ability for a planning commission to establish funds. And so the Hardee County Commission has established a bank account at this point for the funds to go into. And at the last planning commission meeting, we agreed to terms for funds that would come into that fund. So at this point, yes, there is an account set up to accept the funds. But at this county commission meeting this coming Tuesday, this will be voted on in terms. And when I say this, I mean the set guidelines by the planning commission that they're proposing for funds to be accepted, and then agreed uses, because there needs to be guidelines for expenditures. But that is to be voted on at this upcoming county commission meeting on Tuesday.
Okay. Linda?
Yes.
You want to continue the closing?
There's really not much more I can say, and I sure appreciate everybody being here. And you're going to have the links, I think, to the Google Doc, and hopefully we have all the resources there that you all were interested in.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I will email the list and then a recording of this meeting sometime by tomorrow. So please sign up for the newsletter. That's the best way to get the information. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.